Massachusetts. Mr. Moulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Hegseth, I'd like to clarify a few important details for the record. When you texted the launch time for F-18s going into combat over enemy territory facing anti-aircraft missiles on an unclassified signal chat, did that launch time come from Central Command, yes or no?
I know what you're referring to, and there were no
It's a very simple question. Did it come from? It's a very simple
question.
question. Did it come from Central Command?
Well, in this committee, no way in which I communicate or what I communicate on a successful strike is something that I would share.
So you can't even identify the combatant command under which this operation occurred?
Well, everybody knows the
Okay, so everyone knows it's Central Command. So when Central Command sent you this information, did they send it on a classified system or an unclassified system?
Well, as you know, having served yourself, any way that the Secretary of Defense communicates or provides information in and of itself is classified and not to be discussed.
In a high-stakes congressional hearing, Secretary Hegseth found himself at the center of a growing controversy regarding the possible mishandling of classified military information. The central issue revolved around a message he sent containing the launch time of F-18 fighter jets embarking on a combat mission over enemy territory. These aircraft were expected to face anti-aircraft threats, making the operation highly sensitive and strategically significant. Congressman Moulton, a former service member himself, was quick to raise concerns about how this information was shared and whether proper security protocols were followed. Specifically, the focus was on whether the launch tie, arguably a classified detail, was transmitted over an unclassified chat platform, potentially exposing vital military intelligence to unauthorized access. Congressman Moulton pressed the Secretary repeatedly, asking whether this launch time was received from Central Command CENTCOM, which would automatically make it subject to strict classification rules under the Department of Defense's regulations. Secretary Hegseth refused to directly answer the question, dodging with vague statements about how communications involving the Secretary of Defense are inherently classified. This avoidance only heightened concerns. According to established protocol, any information coming from CENTCOM during an active operation, particularly something as precise and actionable as a launch time, would typically carry at least a secret classification. If that information was shared via a non-secure, unclassified system, like a regular signal chat, this could constitute a serious violation of operational security guidelines. What made the situation even more alarming was the Secretary's refusal to even acknowledge the classification level of the message. When asked what the classification markings were, he claimed that such details could not be disclosed in a public setting, despite the fact that acknowledging whether information is classified or not is not itself considered a classified act. This contradictory stance appeared to confirm the congressman's suspicions that the Secretary had, perhaps inadvertently, shared sensitive military details in a way that circumvented proper channels. The potential consequences of such a breach include compromised troop safety, exposure of strategic intentions to hostile actors, and a broader erosion of trust in the Pentagon's internal communication systems. Further intensifying the matter was the anticipation of an upcoming Department of Defense Inspector General report that would likely determine whether the Secretary's actions violated any rules. Congressman Moulton made it clear that if the report concluded the information was indeed classified, there must be accountability at the highest level. However, Secretary Hegseth stopped short of promising to accept responsibility if such a finding were made. This fact raised broader questions about the integrity of leadership within the defense establishment, especially when the principles of national security and personal accountability seem to be in conflict. Ultimately, the incident underscored the fragility of information security in a digital age, especially when even top officials may fall short in adhering to the same standards they expect of those under their command.
So what was the classification marking of the launch time when it was sent to you? Because DoD regulations require information on classified systems to be marked.
What was the classification mark time?
Yeah, what was the classification marking? Because
again, classifications of any information in an ongoing operation that was successful are not things that would be disclosed in a public forum.
You can very well disclose whether or not it was classified. It's not classified to disclose whether or not it was classified. And in fact, DoD regulations state that any classified information has to be labeled with its classification. Was it classified secret or top secret?
What's not classified is that it was an incredibly successful mission against the Houthis.
Okay, so it was classified. So are you trying to say that the information was unclassified?
I'm not
Okay,
trying to say
that's what
anything.
I thought. You're not saying that. So you took classified information from Central Command that had a classification marking on it, because that's what's required by DoD regulations, and you put it on an unclassified system. So we're going to get a report in a few days from the DoD Inspector General. And if the DoD Inspector General finds what is pretty obvious, both to you smiling there in the witness seat and to all of us up here, that the information was, in fact, classified, do you plan to take any accountability for that?
As I pointed out at the time...
You said that accountability is back. Does that not apply to you?
During the intense congressional hearing, a particularly alarming issue emerged when Congressman Moulton raised questions about the dismissal of senior military officials. Specifically, he asked Secretary Hegseth how many generals and admirals had been removed from their positions under his leadership. The secretary hesitated, responding that he didn't know the exact number. This admission prompted the congressman to inform him that the number was 88 high, anking military officers dismissed. What followed next was even more unsettling. When asked why these individuals had been let go, Secretary Hegseth failed to provide a single clear explanation. He repeatedly said they serve at the pleasure of the president, a generic response that offered no transparency or insight into the reasoning behind these significant personnel changes. This exchange raised serious concerns about the motivations and processes behind the dismissal of experienced military leaders. The firing of even one general or admiral is a significant event, usually based on misconduct, failure of leadership, or policy disagreements. When 8 such figures are removed, it naturally raises red flags and demands a thorough explanation. However, Secretary Hegseth's inability or unwillingness to elaborate created the impression that these dismissals were either politically motivated or handled without proper justification. This lack of clarity has the potential to undermine both internal military morale and public confidence in the civilian oversight of the armed forces. In the U.S. military structure, civilian leadership is essential. The Secretary of Defense and other appointed officials are responsible for ensuring that military operations align with broader national policies. However, with that authority comes a heavy responsibility to act with fairness, transparency, and accountability. When senior military officers are removed without public explanation or clear internal justification, it creates a climate of fear and uncertainty among the ranks. Officers may begin to question whether they are being judged based on merit or political allegiance. This shift erodes the foundational principle that military decisions should be based on effectiveness, not politics. Moreover, when decisions are made behind closed doors without proper communication, it sets a dangerous precedent. The American people have a right to understand the actions of those in power, especially when those actions impact national security and the integrity of the armed forces. Congressman Moulton's repeated attempts to get a straightforward answer from Secretary Hegseth were met with frustratingly vague replies. Statements like "they serve at the pleasure of the president" may be technically correct but offer no real substance. They sidestepped the core issue. Why were these generals and admirals removed, and was it done in the best interest of national defense? This issue also highlights a deeper concern, whether the administration is using military leadership positions as a way to enforce compliance with political goals. If military leaders fear they will be dismissed for offering dissenting opinions or presenting inconvenient truths, the entire chain of command is compromised. It stifles honest communication, suppresses innovation, and weakens the ability of the military to respond effectively to threats. Strategic decision-making in defense requires a diversity of perspectives and the freedom to disagree without fear of retaliation. The broader implications of this episode are troubling. It suggests a lack of respect for the institutional knowledge and experience that generals and admirals bring to the table. Many of these leaders have spent decades serving the country, commanding troops, planning operations, and managing crises. To remove them without explanation not only disrespects their service, but also disrupts the continuity of leadership within the military. Stability in command is crucial for ensuring readiness and cohesion, particularly in times of global tension and evolving security challenges. The American public deserves transparency in matters as serious as the dismissal of top military officials. Without clear reasons, the narrative is left open to speculation, conspiracy, and distrust. Secretary Hegseth had an opportunity during the hearing to clarify these decisions, to assure the public that they were made for legitimate reasons, and to demonstrate that the Department of Defense values its leaders and operates with integrity. Instead, he chose to deflect, and in doing so, he missed the chance to reinforce public trust. In the end, leadership is not just about authority, it's about stewardship. It's about making decisions in a way that inspires confidence, honors the contributions of those who serve, and upholds the democratic principles on which the nation is built. By failing to explain the dismissal of 8 senior military leaders, Secretary Hegseth did more than dodge a question. He weakened the
I'm told
trust
it's
that
several
binds
$100
civilian
million,
and military
maybe close to $1
leadership
billion.
together.
How many U.S.-flagged commercial ships have transited the Red Sea since your so-called successful operation?
Well, thankfully, unlike the previous administration,
The answer
we
is
had
0.
Military vessels transit.
No, I didn't ask
just
about
this
military
week.
vessels. I
Well, which
asked
would
about
be the
commercial
precursor
vessels.
for
How many
civilian and
commercial vessels?
transit,
It's been several
thankfully.
weeks. How many commercial vessels, U.S. flagged, have
Well,
transited the
would
Red
you, Mr. Congressman, put civilian ships
The
through
questions
dam
are not to
before
me,
military
Mr. Secretary,
ships?
they're to you.
We have responsibly put military
The answer
ships
is 0.
through first.
I reclaim my time. How many generals and admirals have you fired?
I don't know the exact number, but
You don't know the number. It's 8. Can you explain why any of them were fired? Like, just explain why was...
they all serve at the pleasure of the president. And I think
No, I'm just asking you why.
General Kane is a great example.
I'm just
of
asking
a
you
leader
why.
that we
I
need
think you
at
probably
this
learned
time.
at Princeton what why means. Why did you fire him?
They serve at the pleasure of the president, and we want
Why
better
did you
representation
fire
in
him?
each and every of those.
You can't
each and
explain
every
why
one
you
of those
fired any of
places.
them?
Gentlemen's time's expired. Chair, and I